This happened back when I was in 5th grade, at a place called Meadow Ridge Elementary. I'm not sure if anyone really remembers that weird stretch of time the way I do, but it was the year the whole country got obsessed with creepy clown sightings. It was everywhere on the news, social media, even those random "did you hear" conversations in the grocery store line. One video after another popped up of people dressed as clowns standing by woods or chasing cars, or just staring into traffic. At first it felt like one of those viral things that would blow over. Adults mostly laughed it off, said it was dumb teenagers with too much time and bad taste. But for kids like me, it wasn't funny, it was terrifying. We were young enough that we didn't know where the line was between pranks and real danger. I remember walking to school those mornings, clutching my backpack just a little tighter, glancing at the bushes a little longer, thinking, what if there really is someone out there? I kept telling myself there was no way anything would happen at my school. Meadow Ridge was the safest, most boring little suburban school ever. The kind of place where the biggest drama was whether the tetherball got stuck in the tree again. I don't even know why I thought our school was magically exempt. Maybe I wanted to believe nothing bad ever happened in quiet neighborhoods like ours. But even now, thinking back, I should have known better. Looking back, I realized the scariest part wasn't just the stories. It was knowing something could happen anywhere, even at Meadow Ridge, even on an ordinary school day. And that's exactly where my story begins. The day started just like any other. Math, spelling, the usual. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But by the time recess rolled around, I swear the whole atmosphere had shifted. You know when something feels off? Like a low hum in the air you can't hear but your brain somehow picks up on? That was recess that day. We rushed outside like always, but I noticed right away how kids weren't just running to the swings or basketball court. Small groups were clustered together, whispering, looking around, glancing nervously toward the back fence near the field. A few kids near the far end of the grass, where the trees and fence meet, were talking fast and wide-eyed. I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but I heard one word clearly enough to send a chill straight through me: clown. Some of them claimed they saw something or someone lurking just past the fence line, standing motionless between the skinny tree trunks. Of course, half the kids said they didn't believe it. I didn't know what to think. I stared so hard at that tree line my eyes hurt. I told myself I saw nothing. I told myself they were just making it up. But I couldn't stop scanning the edges of the playground just in case. The strangest part, the teachers. Normally they stood around chatting, half watching. That day they were on high alert. You could see it in how their eyes darted across the playground, how they kept subtly repositioning themselves to cover different areas. Nobody said anything out loud, but I knew they felt it too. I kept wondering, was it really just some dumb rumor? Or was there actually something or someone out there watching us? The rest of the day crawled along. We were back in class, heads down, pretending to focus on some worksheet I don't even remember now. The earlier playground whispers were still bouncing around in the back of my mind, but nothing had happened, so I started convincing myself it was all just kid exaggeration. The classroom was quiet, except for the scratch of pencils and the occasional whisper. Then it happened. Someone at the front of the room let out this sharp gasp, the kind that makes your stomach twist even before you know why. Without thinking, I looked up and followed their gaze. There he was, right outside the window. I remember feeling like my brain short-circuited for a second because it didn't make sense. It was broad daylight. We were in the middle of school. Stuff like this wasn't supposed to happen here. He was just standing there. A full-grown man in this saggy, grimy clown suit, the colors all wrong, faded purples and sickly greens that looked almost moldy. His makeup was worse. It wasn't just a painted grin, it was warped, stretched too wide. His eyes were blackened out, like hollow pits, and that fake smile froze on his face in a way that made it look like the mask itself was alive. I waited for him to move, to walk away, to do something. But he didn't. He stood there, inches from the glass, staring into the classroom like he was deciding which one of us to pick. I remember thinking, is this real? Am I the only one who thinks this isn't normal? Is someone playing a joke? But the longer I stared, the more I knew. This wasn't a prank. Something about him felt wrong. I couldn't stop staring. The clown hadn't moved an inch, just stood there like some twisted statue, waving slowly every few seconds like he was mocking us. I kept waiting for someone to laugh, to admit it was all a dumb prank. No one did. Miss Halverson saw him too. I'll never forget her face in that moment. Not shocked, not scared exactly, but serious in a way that made my stomach drop. She calmly walked to the door, picked up the classroom phone, and stepped just outside into the hallway. I could still see her through the small glass window in the door, her mouth tight as she spoke into the receiver. Something about the way she moved told me this wasn't part of any school Halloween thing, no senior prank, nothing like that. I kept thinking, if she's not brushing it off, then this is real. The minutes dragged. We all sat frozen at our desks, no one daring to speak. I stared out the window, heart hammering, wondering if the clown would suddenly break into a run and come toward the building. He just kept standing there, motionless, the oversized fabric of his suit shifting slightly in the breeze. I swear I could feel his eyes locked on us. Then came the announcement. Crackling through the loudspeaker, the principal's voice, calm but with an urgency I'd never heard before, told us we were going into lockdown. I froze. I knew what to do. We'd practiced this before, but this didn't feel like a drill. I sat there, my mind racing. How long had he been out there? Did he watch us come in this morning? Was he waiting for us? For me? I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. The second the lockdown announcement ended, Miss Halverson sprang into action. The lights snapped off, casting the room into a dull blue-gray shadow. She moved fast to lock the door and pull down the window blinds. But for a split second before the last one fell, I swear I saw that shape still standing there. The clown, unmoving, watching. We scrambled under our desks, trying to stay as small and quiet as possible. I crawled into the tight space, hugging my knees, my heart pounding so hard I was sure someone could hear it. The room, usually full of noisy energy, had never been so still. I could make out the soft rustling as kids shifted uncomfortably. The occasional sharp breath, a faint sniffle from someone trying not to cry. A couple of kids whispered nervously, convinced it was a dumb prank that someone's older brother had dressed up to mess with us. I couldn't believe how calm they sounded. My brain wouldn't let me relax. I stared at the shadows flickering on the walls, every creak of the building making me jump. I kept thinking, was he still out there? Or worse, had he moved? Was he walking the halls right now, just out of sight? What if he was already inside? I started silently counting the seconds to calm myself. 1, 2, 3. I lost track somewhere around 200. Time didn't feel real anymore. I was just trapped in this surreal nightmare, stuck between the normal world I knew and whatever this was. The longer we stayed hidden, the more the questions multiplied. Why here? Why our school? Why today? What did he want? I had no answers. Only the waiting, only the fear. The rest of the day after the lockdown felt like walking through a fog. The clown had vanished. That's all the principal told us. The situation has been handled. That was it. No details, no explanations. We were expected to just go back to normal, like nothing had happened. When the final bell rang, I grabbed my stuff and met up with Eli, my best friend. I still don't know why I didn't call my parents to pick me up. I think part of me just wanted things to feel normal again. Just a regular walk home like every other day. We were about halfway through the path behind the school when we heard footsteps pounding behind us. 2 girls from our grade came sprinting past, their faces pale, eyes wide with panic. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. I already knew. I turned my head slowly, dreading what I'd see. There he was, half concealed behind the scraggly line of trees that bordered the field and the road beyond. Just far enough back to be partially hidden, but close enough that there was no mistaking him. The same stained purple and green clown suit, the same frozen, horrifying painted face. And he was waving. Not frantically, not like someone joking around. It was slow, controlled, like he was calling them over. Or maybe taunting them. Or worse, waiting. I stood there frozen, every instinct screaming at me to run. I never spoke, never even looked at Eli. We both just bolted. As I ran, my mind raced. How? Why was he back? Why wait until dismissal after everything? Was it us he wanted? Them? I'll never understand it. That part still haunts me most. The fact that he came back. The fact that he waited. The second I burst through the door at home, I told my parents everything. I think I expected them to fix it, to somehow make it all go away. Call the police? Get someone to explain what just happened. I wanted that security, that adult reassurance that everything was fine. But there wasn't much they could do. They listened, they called the school, they called the police. Officers came out that evening. They walked the perimeter of the school and checked the woods where I saw him last. They didn't find anything. No footprints, no broken branches, no strange tire tracks. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. The next day at school, it was all anyone talked about. Theories flew like wildfire. Some kids claimed he was a runaway circus performer. Others swore he was part of some YouTube prank channel. A few kids said they thought they saw him again, but nothing ever came of it. The teachers acted like they didn't want to acknowledge it at all. No announcements, no warnings, nothing. Just back to business as usual. And me, I kept replaying every second in my head. The classroom, the window, the woods, the waving. I still do. Was it just some messed up prank to scare kids? Was he trying to lure someone? Was he planning something worse and changed his mind? I don't know. I'll never know. That's the part that keeps me up sometimes, even now. The lack of closure. The way he came back after the lockdown like he had a plan. The way no one ever found him. I keep asking myself, why my school? Why my class? Why that day? I don't think I'll ever get an answer. And honestly, that's what makes it worse. I think about it way too often, way more than I probably should. It's weird how the most random, boring days can flip into something you never shake off. It was my freshman year at Ridgeview High, a regular Wednesday fourth period, nothing dramatic. I had just bombed some pop quiz in Mr. Alvarez's biology class. Honestly, I wasn't even that stressed. I had my head buried in my backpack, half listening to the low hum of kids chatting, zippers unzipping, the squeak of sneakers on tile floors. Then the speaker crackled, that ancient staticky crackle that always made people roll their eyes. I didn't even look up at first. The usual flat voice echoed through the classroom. This is a lockdown, lock all doors. Lights off, stay quiet. The words just bounced off me like they always did. Another drill. We had done these lockdowns so many times they didn't mean anything anymore. Just another waste of class time. A reason to put our phones under our sweatshirts and scroll for a few minutes. Alvarez, who always acted like nothing fazed him, sighed loudly and did the usual door-locked, blinds pulled, lights flicked off with a loud click. He motioned with his hand for us to huddle into the corner like we always did. I shuffled over with everyone else. Backpack still halfway unzipped. People whispered and laughed quietly, cracking dumb jokes. I remember thinking how stupid it was. We were acting like nothing could possibly happen here. This was Ridgeview, suburbia, boring, safe Ridgeview. If only I had known. I still think about that moment, how casual we all were. It's the last second I remember feeling normal. Everything that came next burned itself into my memory forever. I can still hear it, you know. That second announcement. Sometimes I wonder if my brain plays it back on purpose, like a cruel reminder. The speaker crackled again, but this time it wasn't the usual robotic calm. The same voice, yeah, but rushed, uneven, like whoever was speaking was barely holding it together. I wasn't really listening at first until I caught the words, "This is not a drill." I repeat, this is not a drill. I swear the entire room froze. No jokes, no whispers, just dead, suffocating silence. It was like someone hit pause on reality. I glanced at Mr. Alvarez, and for the first time ever he looked unsure. Not panicked, but definitely thrown off. He stared at his phone for a few seconds longer than he should have, like he was hoping for some kind of update or maybe instructions that never came. I pressed my back harder against the cold wall. My legs had already started to feel weak. The usual shuffle and rustle of classmates shifting around was gone. Everyone was holding their breath. Then I heard it, the faintest wail of sirens in the distance. At first I told myself it was just coincidence, like maybe there was an accident nearby. But deep down I knew better. We all did. The sirens were getting closer. My hands were shaking and I had to tuck them under my legs to make them stop. My mind raced. Was someone hurt? Was someone already inside the school? Was this just an overreaction? I kept trying to come up with some normal explanation. None came. I stared at the door like it might somehow give me answers. It never did. I didn't think it could get worse. I was wrong. Without any warning, the lights just died. 1 second we were sitting in that dim classroom twilight, and the next, pure black. Not the kind of darkness you get at night where your eyes slowly adjust, but this deep, suffocating nothingness. It swallowed us whole. I barely had time to react before the emergency strip lighting outside the door flickered on, throwing this eerie green glow into the room. It barely reached us. Shadows stretched and twisted in ways that made my stomach churn. I didn't even realize how loud we had been breathing until that moment. Suddenly, every tiny sound felt like it echoed down the hallway for miles. Someone's backpack zipper creaked open, and I swear I thought it was a gun being cocked. A chair leg scraped somewhere, and I flinched so hard I almost knocked over the person next to me. Then a sob, soft, shaky, barely there, but I heard it. Someone near the windows was trying and failing to keep it together. I couldn't blame them. I was biting the inside of my cheek so hard I could taste blood. I kept staring at the door, that thin rectangle of wired glass, the way the weak hallway light painted just a sliver of the doorframe. I waited for something, anything, to move past it. I couldn't decide what was worse, the possibility of seeing someone or seeing nothing at all. The air felt heavier with every second, like the room itself was closing in around us, squeezing tighter and tighter. I don't know how long we sat there. Minutes, hours, time stopped existing. We were all just stuck in that thick, unbearable waiting. There's a sound I'll never unhear. I didn't know footsteps could sound so cold. We must have been sitting in that heavy silence for what felt like forever. My legs had gone completely numb. I was just starting to think maybe the sirens had scared off whoever was out there. Maybe it was over. That's when I heard it. The soft tap of a foot against the tile. Then another. Then another. Slow. Measured. Way too calm for what was happening. It wasn't the quick steps of a teacher trying to check rooms. It wasn't the heavy boots of a cop. It was just casual, unbothered. I held my breath as the steps got closer and closer until they stopped right outside our door. My stomach dropped so fast, I thought I was going to throw up. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Nobody moved. I could hear the person's breathing through the crack under the door. Then the doorknob turned. Slowly, not violently, not yanking, just a smooth, careful twist back and forth, testing it, checking it. I was frozen. I felt like my skin wasn't attached to my body anymore. My fingers dug into the carpet so hard my knuckles hurt. They kept twisting the handle over and over, like they were trying to decide what to do next. I don't know why, but that was the worst part. If they had tried to kick it down, I could have processed that. But this quiet, patient testing was so much worse. Then came the voice. Low, too low, almost like they wanted us to lean in to hear. Calm, friendly, too friendly, like everything was fine and we should just go ahead and open the door. I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself over and over it had to be a mistake. It had to be, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I wanted to believe they had left. I needed to believe it, but they hadn't. The soft twisting of the handle stopped, and for a few seconds there was nothing but silence. Then the knocking started again. Not soft this time. Sharper, harder. Each thud made me jump even though I braced for them. The whole door rattled ever so slightly on its hinges. My brain was screaming at me not to move, not to make a sound, not to breathe too loudly. I stared straight ahead, refusing to look at the door. I don't know why, but I couldn't. Maybe if I didn't see it, it wouldn't be real. That's when I felt someone next to me barely lean over and whisper so soft I almost didn't catch it. They're right outside. I just saw a shadow. I felt my stomach twist into knots. The narrow rectangle of wired glass in the door was just tall enough for someone to peek in. I kept my eyes glued to the floor, heart hammering so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Was this person alone? Were the cops already in the building? Were they coming? What if this person got in? What if the door gave way? I had never been so terrified of a simple door handle in my life. The worst part wasn't even the knocks. It was the in-between. The silence. Sitting there, not knowing if they were still standing inches away or if they had moved on. Every second stretched on forever. I kept imagining the door slowly creaking open even though I knew it was locked. That feeling of helplessness never left me. It still hasn't. I thought the worst had already passed. I was wrong. We sat there in that awful limbo, waiting, barely breathing, listening to nothing. It was like every sense had been cranked up to unbearable levels. Every creak in the building sounded like a gunshot. I kept my head down, still refusing to look at the door. My legs had long since gone numb under me. My mind was stuck looping through the same useless questions. Were they still out there? Were the cops coming? Were we safe? Then it happened. A scream. High-pitched, sharp, and so sudden it felt like it split the air in two. It came from somewhere down the hall, close enough that I knew exactly what classroom it had come from, but far enough that I couldn't do a thing about it. Just one scream, then absolute silence. I froze. Everyone did. My whole body locked up so fast, I felt dizzy. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't even blinking. I could feel cold sweat bead along my spine and stick to the back of my shirt. I bit down on my sleeve as hard as I could, just to stop the shaky noise that almost slipped from my throat. The fabric tore slightly, but I didn't care. I remember feeling something shift in that moment, like the fear had gone from what if this happens to this is happening. I glanced around and caught the terrified faces of my classmates. A couple of them started silently crying, shoulders trembling, mouths pressed shut. Time stopped working after that. I don't know how long we sat there, seconds, minutes, hours. It felt like the hallway outside was a black hole pulling all sound and hope into it. None of us moved. None of us even dared to think about moving. I don't know how long we stayed huddled in that corner. I stopped trying to keep track. Time had become useless. It felt like hours, though I'm sure it was only minutes. The waiting was unbearable, like being stuck on the edge of something terrible and not knowing which way you'd fall. Then we heard it. Voices, shouting, but controlled. Commands being barked out, distant at first, then closer. Stay where you are. Police. Do not leave your rooms. For a split second, I thought it might be another trick. I wasn't alone. I could tell by the way Mr. Alvarez stayed rooted in place, shoulders tense, staring at the door. He didn't move until the lock turned from the outside, and the door creaked open just enough for someone to show him something. I never saw what. Only then did he finally nod and motion for us to get up. I stood slowly, legs stiff and unsteady. Filing out of the classroom felt surreal, like stepping onto another planet. The hallway was lined with pale, shaken kids and exhausted teachers. Some of them had tear-streaked faces. Others stared blankly at the floor. Flashing red and blue lights cut through the windows and splashed across the walls. I barely processed any of it until I saw him. A man, not a student. Pale skin, long greasy hair, dark clothes hanging off him awkwardly. His face didn't register anything. No anger, no fear, just emptiness. Two cops had him by the arms, leading him out the side entrance. That image stayed burned into my brain. Later they told us someone had slipped in through a side delivery door by the science wing. They reassured us over and over that no one was hurt, that everything was under control. I wanted to believe them. I still want to, but my mind keeps circling back. The knock, the voice, the shadow, the scream. I don't think I'll ever know the whole truth. I went to a school called Riverview High. Tiny place, middle of nowhere. I'm talking about the kind of town where you can't even go get gas without running into at least 3 people you know. If you weren't related, you were at least familiar. Our graduating class barely scraped past 80 students. It wasn't one of those sprawling suburban schools with football stadiums and pep rallies that look like movie sets. Riverview was as plain and ordinary as it gets, but somehow I thought I had the place all figured out. You couldn't not know people. Whether you wanted to or not, faces were familiar, names stuck in your head, teachers recycled the same lessons every year, and the halls smelled like old books and floor polish. We had a vending machine that never worked, and an ancient gym that creaked with every step. I remember thinking, this is my world, my bubble. Nothing unexpected ever happened here. It was safe, boring, but safe. Looking back, I realize now how much I took that boring predictability for granted. I used to walk those halls thinking I understood the rules, like life had this unspoken script and we were all following along. The jocks, the quiet kids, the loud ones always skipping class. Everything and everyone had a place. Or so I believed. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that someone in that crowd was about to break the script. Someone I barely noticed. Someone whose name I didn't even say out loud until much later, was quietly carrying something dark beneath the surface. That's the thing about places like Riverview. They feel safe right up until the moment they're not. And for me, that moment was coming. There was this kid, Ethan. I don't even know if kid is the right word. He was our age, sure, but he moved through school like he belonged somewhere else, somewhere quieter. Everyone at Riverview High knew Ethan, at least by sight. You couldn't miss him. Same seat, same blank stare, same heavy backpack slung over his shoulder like he carried the weight of something more than just books. But knowing of him and actually knowing him were two very different things. Ethan never spoke. Not a word. Not when Mr. Delaney, our computer teacher, called attendance. Not when someone dropped their books right next to him. Not even when the seniors started their usual games. And Mr. Delaney, he wasn't the type to intervene. He'd just clear his throat and look away as the teasing started, low cutting comments about Ethan's silence. Paper balls tossed at the back of his head when they thought no one was watching. But I watched. I always watched. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself that Ethan probably didn't care, that he'd learned to block them out. I told myself a lot of things. It's funny how easy it is to justify doing nothing when you don't want to get involved. I sat 2 rows over, just far enough to feel safe, just close enough to see the way his shoulders tightened whenever a whispered insult landed or a crumpled paper bounced off his desk. Now I can't stop thinking about how he never even flinched. That was what got me. No reaction at all, like he had buried himself so deep inside that even cruelty couldn't reach him anymore. I noticed. I always noticed. I just never acted. And I don't know if I regret that more now or back then, but regret it, I do. Then one day, Ethan just vanished. No warning, no quiet shuffle into Mr. Delaney's computer lab, no silent presence by the window seat he claimed like some invisible territory, just an empty chair that felt way louder than his usual silence ever had. I remember staring at it for way too long, like the absence itself was shouting. People started talking almost immediately, of course. That's what happens in small towns. Whispers swirl and grow even when no one has a clue what they're actually talking about. Someone claimed they saw a lone figure, maybe Ethan, maybe not, walking along the old train tracks that cut through the woods behind Riverview High. The woods we were all told not to go near, the ones that felt off even on the brightest day. At first, I brushed it off. Why would Ethan be out there? What would he even be doing? I told myself he probably had the flu, or maybe just decided to skip a day like any normal kid. But then, around lunchtime, the school sent out one of those bland safety notifications. Just a precaution, they said. Standard protocol. Nothing to worry about. Except I was worried. I couldn't explain why. I didn't even know Ethan. Not really, but something about the way he'd sat there for months absorbing everything without flinching, and then suddenly, poof, gone. It made my stomach knot in a way I couldn't shake. The next morning, Ethan came back. Same seat, same stare. Like nothing had happened. No one asked. Not a single person, including me. I told myself I didn't want to pry, but deep down I knew I just didn't want to get pulled into something I might not understand. I should have said something. I still wonder what would have happened if I had. It was late one afternoon, just after the final bell had rung and the last of the buses had rumbled off down the cracked asphalt road. I was walking to my car like I always did, keys in hand, mind on autopilot, when I saw him. Ethan, sitting by himself on the crumbling curb at the far edge of the student lot, staring out at nothing. I don't know what made me stop. I could have just kept walking, pretended I didn't see him like everyone else always did. But something about how small and worn he looked in that moment froze me, like he had been hollowed out. I heard myself ask if he needed a ride. He nodded, almost like he didn't believe I'd actually offered. The drive itself couldn't have been more than 10 minutes, but it felt like I'd stepped into some surreal bubble of awkwardness and weight. We barely spoke. The silence wasn't the same blank kind I'd gotten used to seeing from him at school. This silence felt sharp, crowded, like the air in the car was too heavy for either of us to break. He did say a few things, just fragments really, little confessions about how people treated him, how he felt invisible most of the time, how exhausting it was. I remember thinking how strange it was to hear his voice at all. Not much emotion, but enough frustration and resignation in the way he strung his words together to let me know this wasn't just shyness. This was something deeper. I tried to say something comforting. I can't even remember what I said. It probably sounded hollow and stupid. I still replay that drive sometimes, wondering if I missed the moment I was supposed to do more, to say the thing that could have mattered. I'll never know if I did or didn't. That thought still follows me. It wasn't long after that strange, heavy car ride that everything shifted. The day started off normal, or at least as normal as anything ever felt at Riverview. I remember zoning out in English class, watching the clock crawl toward lunch, when the intercom crackled alive with a voice that still haunts me. Lockdown. This is not a drill. The words hit like a punch. Everyone froze. My teacher scrambled to kill the lights, pull the blinds, herd us into the corner like we were little kids again. We sat there, packed tight, barely breathing. Someone beside me whispered, asking what was going on, but no one had an answer. I didn't either. We sat in that dark, suffocating silence for what felt like forever. In reality, it was probably only minutes. But when you're pressed into a wall with your heart pounding so hard you swear others can hear it, time plays tricks. Later they said someone had been spotted outside, a person in a mask, carrying a duffel bag, trying to get inside. The school's doors held. Whoever it was never made it past the entrance. Police cars arrived fast. Sirens echoed off the brick walls. They let us out early that day, told us everything was safe. Normal, even. I remember walking to my car in stunned silence. The whole school felt different. Like the ground itself had shifted under us. No one talked much. I couldn't shake the image of the masked figure standing on the other side of the door. At the time, I didn't know. I had no clue how close to home this had actually hit. No idea how twisted and tangled my small connection to it all really was. I wish I had known. Part of me still wishes I didn't. I thought the day was over. I thought the sirens, the lockdown, the panic would stay sealed behind the walls of Riverview High. I was wrong. It was late. The house was quiet, pitch dark except for the faint glow of the street lamp outside my window. That's when I heard it. The softest tapping against the glass. At first I told myself I imagined it. Maybe a branch, maybe the wind. But the sound came again, deliberate, measured. I pulled back the curtain just enough to see. My heart stopped. It was Ethan. There he was, standing just inches away from me, barely illuminated by the yellow light. His expression was empty in a way that scared me more than anything else could have. Not angry, not sad, just hollow. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but deep down I knew why he was there. I knew before he even opened his mouth. I slid the window up just a crack, enough to hear his voice. I don't even know how to describe it. Flat, distant, like he wasn't fully there. He said just enough for me to understand what I'd been dreading. I didn't want to hear more. I couldn't. I didn't let him in. I couldn't. Something told me it wasn't safe. I told him to leave. I backed away and walked straight to my parents' room, barely able to get the words out. The police came soon after. I stood there, staring at the empty window, my mind spinning. Did I do the right thing? Could I have stopped this earlier? Was there something I missed? I still don't know. I keep playing that night over and over in my head. The knock, the voice, the feeling that I was standing at the edge of something I barely understood. I'm not sure I'll ever understand it. The next days blurred together in ways I can barely piece back now. The police cars, the news whispers, the slow drip of information that spread through the hallways of Riverview like cold fog. Ethan was arrested. The official word was making a terroristic threat. I guess that's what happens when someone shows up outside a school wearing a mask, carrying a bag. No one wanted to look inside. It became a headline for a few days. Then it faded. Just another shocking story in a long line of shocking stories no one wanted to think about for too long. I heard he did time. Juvenile detention, maybe. No one really knew. People stopped talking about it after a while, like forgetting it happened would somehow make it unhappen. Eventually someone said he got out. Beyond that, nothing. Total silence, like he disappeared into thin air. Like he was never there at all. I never saw him again. Sometimes I lie awake wondering what became of him. Did he get help? Did he even want help? Or did the world just swallow him up the way it always seemed to? I keep going back to that stupid car ride, that stupid moment by my window. Could I have said something? Could I have changed the course of what happened? Could any of us? I don't have answers. I don't think I ever will. That's what sticks with me more than anything, the not knowing, the horrible gnawing emptiness of maybe. They say time makes things clearer. For me, time just made the questions louder. And Riverview, it went back to normal, or at least it pretended to. But for me, nothing was ever normal again. Not really, not after Ethan. You know how some mornings just blur together? That was me. Sophomore year, Westfield High School, Crestview, Georgia. Nothing exciting, nothing out of the ordinary. It was way too early, like it always was. I had this habit of getting to school before most people showed up. Not because I liked being early, but because I hated the rush. So there I was, sitting in the back of the theater arts classroom, slouched over my backpack with my earbuds in, flicking through my playlist for the 100th time. The lights overhead hummed, and the weak sun barely slipped through the cracked blinds. The walls with the faded posters of school plays from years before almost felt comforting in their dullness. That classroom, at that hour, felt like the safest, most boring place on earth. It was just me and a couple of the other early birds, heads down, locked into their own worlds. I stared at the clock, 7:12 a.m. or something close. It barely even registered. I wasn't thinking about anything big, just mentally going through my usual list. Did I remember my homework? Was I going to bomb the pop quiz in bio later? Would the cafeteria have those weird turkey sandwiches again? Normal, stupid stuff. Even when the door creaked open and a few more students wandered in, yawning and dragging their feet, I didn't think much of it. Mr. Callahan wasn't even in yet. I just sat there, music low enough so I wouldn't get yelled at if someone finally noticed. If you had told me that in less than an hour I'd be locked in that same building, heart racing, wondering if I was going to make it home, I would have laughed. But that's the thing about normal mornings. They don't stay normal for long. It happened so fast, but somehow it felt slow too. You know that weird feeling when something's wrong but your brain refuses to catch up? That was me, Mr. Callahan walked in, and without raising his voice or anything, just motioned for us to move behind the heavy black curtains that lined the back of the stage. No panic, no shouting, just that quiet urgency that somehow makes you more nervous than if someone was screaming. I remember standing up, completely confused. We had just done a lockdown drill the day before. It was annoying and boring, like always. So for a split second, I figured maybe someone had messed up the schedule and we were going through the motions again. Another wasted morning. But the second my foot stepped onto the old, creaky wooden stage floor, something inside me shifted. It was too still. You don't realize how much normal schools hum and buzz until all that background noise vanishes. There were no voices in the hall, no lockers slamming, no late students rushing in, just this suffocating silence hanging over everything like a heavy blanket. Then somewhere faint, so faint I wasn't sure if I imagined it, I caught the distant wail of sirens. That was the moment I knew. My stomach clenched, my legs kept moving, but my mind started racing. Was it a fire? An accident? Something worse? I tried not to let the thought form fully, like if I didn't name it, it wouldn't be real. We slipped behind the curtain into the pitch-black storage area. I didn't ask questions. I just followed because suddenly it didn't feel like a drill anymore. It felt real, too real, and I had no idea what was waiting for us. Time stopped making sense. I couldn't tell if 5 minutes had passed or 50. We were packed tight behind the curtain, pressed against dusty costume racks and old prop boxes, and no one dared to move much. The only sound was the uneven breathing of everyone trying to stay quiet. And yet, even in the dark, the whispers started. They always do. I had my phone clenched in my hand, thumb shaking as I tapped at the screen, hoping for a signal. The little bars taunted me. 1 second they were there. The next they vanished. Someone near me nudged my arm and mouthed something. I couldn't even respond. I was scrolling Snapgram, seeing nothing but the usual random posts. Then the first message came through. "It's just a fight," someone whispered. I almost believed that, wanted to believe that. I was so ready to be annoyed that we were all hiding over 2 kids throwing punches. Then someone else said they heard it was a stabbing. My chest tightened. Someone else whispered about multiple people involved. The word knife floated in the dark like a curse. I stared at my screen, refreshing over and over, desperate for anything that made sense. There was nothing. No alerts. No official texts. Just fragments passed between us like some twisted game of telephone. I wanted to yell out, "What's actually going on?" But of course I couldn't. The worst part? I kept thinking about how big the school felt, how many hallways and rooms there were, and how we were completely blind in this tiny pocket of darkness. How could something like this be happening, right here, right now, and none of us knew what was real? The not knowing was the part that ate away at me the most. I gave up on the phone. Every time I looked at it, my heart rate spiked for no reason. It just made things worse. So I shoved it deep into my hoodie pocket and pressed my back against the cold wall behind the curtain. There was no space to move, barely enough to breathe without brushing against someone else. I tried to control my breathing, but every inhale felt way too loud. Was I the only one breathing like that? I couldn't tell. That thin sliver of light underneath the curtain was the only proof the world still existed outside our tiny hiding spot. I stared at it, fixated, like it might tell me something. I kept waiting for shadows to appear, for footsteps to stop just outside. Every little noise made me flinch. A distant metallic clang, a muffled voice that I couldn't quite make out, or maybe I imagined that part. I don't even know anymore. I sat frozen, trapped in my own head. I ran through every possibility on a loop. What if someone burst in here? What if the door creaked open and we saw a silhouette we didn't recognize? What if we had nowhere to run? My mind just spiraled, dragging me down with it. At one point, I swear I heard footsteps in the hall. I held my breath so hard my chest ached. Nothing happened. Silence returned, heavier than before. The scariest part wasn't what I heard. It was what I didn't hear. No announcements, no alarms, no sirens anymore. Just the unbearable stillness stretching on, and I sat there thinking, what if this was how it ended? Just waiting, helpless, behind a curtain in the dark, not knowing anything, not even knowing if you'd ever get out. I don't even remember how the curtain opened or who gave the all clear. It just happened. 1 second we were frozen in that cramped space, and the next we were blinking against the dull fluorescent lights of the classroom like survivors stumbling out of a bunker. We filed back to our desks without speaking. No one pushed. No one laughed. It was like we'd all silently agreed we didn't want to break whatever fragile thread was holding the air together. I sat down in my usual seat, the one by the window, but it didn't feel like my seat anymore. The room didn't feel like my room. I kept trying to convince myself maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe 2 students had gotten into a bad fight and the school had overreacted. I actually wanted it to be something small, something that would make me roll my eyes later and tell the story like a joke. I stared at my desk, willing it to be just that simple. But then I started to notice things. A girl a few rows over was silently wiping her face, her shoulders shaking even though she wasn't making a sound. Another kid sat perfectly still, staring down at his lap like if he moved, the world would fall apart. No one made eye contact. No one dared to speak above a whisper. I knew in that moment, deep down, it wasn't just a fight. Something worse had happened. We all felt it without saying a word. There was this heavy, invisible weight pressing down on all of us. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened out there had crossed some line we didn't even know existed, and I had no idea how we were supposed to come back from it. The waiting shifted into a blur. Names were being called, students quietly gathering their things and slipping out of the room. Every time someone else left, I felt stuck, like I was being forgotten in a bad dream that wouldn't end. Then finally, my name. I walked out of the building, but I barely registered anything. The school didn't even look like my school anymore. The sky seemed duller, the air heavier. I followed the slow stream of students toward the practice field, where cars were lined up in messy rows, some with their hazard lights blinking. I scanned the crowd in panic until I saw her car. I ran, faster than I ever had in gym. When I reached the door and yanked it open, my mom was already reaching for me. I collapsed into her arms before I could even speak. I don't remember if she started crying first, or if I did. It didn't matter. We just held on, both of us trying to convince ourselves I was really there. The drive to her work is a complete blank. I stared out the window but didn't see anything. My head was spinning, but I couldn't process a single clear thought. I just knew I didn't want to go home yet. I wasn't ready to walk through that door and pretend everything was fine. At the community center where she worked, we slipped into an empty side room. No one bothered us. We sat there in silence, side by side, not knowing what to say. I kept thinking if I stayed absolutely still, if I didn't speak, maybe it would all go away. Maybe I could press rewind on the day. But deep down I knew I couldn't. Nothing would undo what had already happened. The rest of the day happened, but I barely existed in it. I went through the motions, sat at the dinner table, nodded when spoken to, but my phone never left my hand. I kept refreshing every local news site, every school message board, every Snapgram account that even hinted at Westfield High. The details trickled in slowly, like poison. 2 students had been rushed to the hospital. One of them hadn't made it. A teacher had been hurt too. I remember staring at the screen, the words swimming in and out of focus, like my brain refused to let them sink in. A 15-year-old student in custody. More students charged. I reread the updates again and again, as if the facts might change if I looked hard enough. The worst part was when I found out someone had recorded it. Not just recorded it, but posted the video online like it was just another piece of content. They said it was shaky. The phone pointed at the ground, but you could hear the screams. I never watched it. I still won't. Just knowing it existed made me feel sick. I couldn't stop thinking, was it someone I knew? Someone I passed every day in the hall? Someone who sat in the cafeteria near me? Was it planned, or did everything just snap out of nowhere? My mind raced in circles, trying to solve something that had no answer. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, phone clutched in my hand even though there were no more updates. I kept thinking maybe the next refresh would explain it all. It never did. It still hasn't. And maybe that's what haunts me most. The not knowing, the way no one can tell you how something so normal turned into a nightmare in seconds. You never really think your life is going to turn into one of those stories, the ones people read about or hear in a true crime podcast, and think, thank God that's not me. I used to be one of those people. Now, I'm the person telling it. I live on the outskirts of Baltimore, not deep in the city, but not exactly out in the sticks either. The kind of place where you hear crickets at night but still lock every door twice. It's just me, my son, and Emma. Emma isn't mine by blood. She's the daughter of my best friend Rachel. Rachel, who isn't here anymore. I still hate saying it out loud. Rachel was murdered, brutally, by her own husband, a man who made national news for reasons that still make me sick. I can barely even bring myself to think of him as a person. They locked him away for what should have been forever. They said life without parole. They said, when Rachel died, Emma had no one, no grandparents, no other family that could or would take her in. So I did what I knew Rachel would have done for me. I filed papers, fought through the mess of legal garbage, and Emma became mine. Not officially at first, but where it mattered. At home, at school, in our daily life. I teach at Cedar Ridge Academy, a small middle school where both my son and Emma go. It was convenient. It felt safe. I liked knowing I could keep an eye on both of them. There's a comfort in routines, in bells ringing on schedule, in kids whining about homework. I clung to that normalcy more than I realized. I should have known better. I keep going back to that morning. It plays on a loop in my head, always the same, always leaving me with the same hollow feeling. The kind of feeling where you swear you missed something obvious and you can't forgive yourself for it. The day started like any other at Cedar Ridge Academy. Cool, damp Baltimore air, teachers rushing in balancing coffees and lesson plans, kids milling around the front lawn dragging their backpacks like dead weights. I was halfway through chatting with a colleague about the upcoming math assessments when one of the maintenance staff mentioned it. Just in passing, someone had been spotted near the perimeter fence. A guy, just standing there, pacing back and forth along the tree line. They said he looked scruffy, like he'd been on the road a while. Dirty clothes, wild hair, thin, agitated. At the time I brushed it off. People sometimes hang around schools for all kinds of reasons. Custody exchanges, confused delivery drivers, even parents too early for pickup. I remember thinking, probably nothing. I had papers to grade, a lesson to prep, kids to wrangle. I didn't give it another thought. But now I can't stop thinking about it. Could it have been him? Was it really him, already watching, already there, scoping out the school, waiting for the perfect moment? The thought makes my skin crawl even now. I wonder if that was the moment. The one shot I had to prevent what came next. What if I'd walked out to look? What if someone had called the police right then? But I didn't, none of us did. And I'll never know if that split-second decision sealed what happened later that day. It was just another Monday. At least, that's what I keep telling myself when I replay the timeline. The classroom smelled like dry erase markers and stale air. My sixth graders were halfway through solving equations, heads down, pencils scratching, the usual rhythm of controlled chaos. And then my phone buzzed. Just a soft vibration on my desk. Harmless. Ordinary. I glanced at it, expecting maybe a reminder, an email, something mundane. But what I saw made my heart drop straight into my stomach. A pickup notification from the school's emergency contact system. Someone had arrived at the front office to sign out Emma, claimed to be her father. I remember staring at the screen like the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. They never do. My mind raced. Emma's biological father was not on any approved list. He wasn't allowed within 100 miles of her. No relatives lived nearby. No authorized pickup had been scheduled. I told myself it was probably an error, a glitch, maybe a miscommunication. I tried to focus back on my students, but my hands had gone cold and my pulse was hammering in my ears. The words claimed to be her father just kept repeating in my head. Could it be him? Could he have somehow found a way out? No. I shook the thought off. It was impossible. Wasn't it? I glanced toward the door of my classroom over and over again, feeling like any second it would swing open and something or someone would be standing there. I couldn't shake the sense that reality had just shifted and no one else in the room knew it yet. I knew better. I just didn't know how much better yet. I don't even remember grabbing the phone. I must have. My fingers moved before my brain caught up. All I knew was that Emma could not be anywhere near that front office. I told them to stall whoever was there. Just stall. I don't know what excuse I gave. I'm not sure I even made sense. I called down to her classroom and asked for Emma to be sent to me. Simple, routine. No panic in my voice, at least I hope not. My heart was anything but calm. I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous, overreacting. It had to be a mistake, a system error, a mix-up, nothing more. As I waited, I tried to keep teaching, tried to hold the illusion of normal. Sixth graders were still solving math problems, doodling in notebooks, passing folded notes when they thought I wasn't looking. They had no idea what was creeping closer. None of us really did. I kept glancing at the door, counting the seconds. Every sound from the hallway made me flinch. Was I really about to pull a student out of class over a hunch? Was this how teachers got fired? But every time I asked myself those questions, my gut answered louder than reason. I still wonder about that moment. Was it instinct? Was it the years I spent reading too many news stories and worst-case scenarios? Or was it just pure stupid luck? I don't know. I'll never know. All I know is that the door finally opened and Emma walked in, completely unaware of the weight that lifted off my chest, and the far heavier weight that was still barreling toward us, whether we were ready or not. It happened so fast and yet felt painfully slow, like time itself had splintered. Not even 5 minutes after Emma walked through my door, the lockdown alarm erupted through the school. That sound, I swear I still hear it sometimes. Loud, piercing, sharp enough to stop your breath mid-sentence. It wasn't a drill. You know the difference. We all knew. I froze for a second too long. Long enough for my mind to flood with questions I couldn't answer. Was it him? Was he already inside the building? Had I miscalculated, been too late? Or was it something completely unrelated? A fight, a prank, a false alarm. I begged it to be anything but what my gut was screaming. The kids looked to me wide-eyed, waiting for what to do next. Somehow I snapped into motion. We followed protocol, but everything felt surreal. Desks scraped across tile floors as we pushed them against the door. We pulled down the blinds, switched off the lights. I herded everyone into the far corner of the room, huddled together, breath shallow, barely whispering. Emma was right beside me, silent, rigid, her small hand clenched tight around her sleeve. I kept my hand on her shoulder, partly to comfort her, partly to convince myself she was really there. My heart raced so hard I thought the kids might hear it. Every creak in the hallway felt like footsteps. Every shadow under the door frame twisted into something worse. I kept thinking, how did we get here? It had been just another normal day, and now I was barricading a classroom like it was the last safe place on earth. I still can't wrap my head around how fast normal slipped through my fingers. Time warped in that locked classroom. I couldn't tell if it had been 20 minutes or 2 hours. The kids fidgeted in the darkness, whispering nervously, their tiny voices shaking. My legs had long since gone numb from crouching. I just kept staring at the door, waiting for something, anything to happen. Eventually, the siren stopped. The lights came back on. We stayed frozen until a soft knock and the clear, clipped voice of law enforcement broke the spell. We were escorted out slowly, in tight groups, past a line of grim-faced officers and cruisers with flashing lights cutting into the early afternoon gloom. That's when I heard what had actually happened, or at least what little anyone knew. Rachel's husband had escaped. The man who had haunted my worst fears had slipped through the cracks. A prison transport bus, moving inmates between facilities, had been rammed by a car on a rural road. The bus flipped. Prisoners escaped. Guards were killed or badly beaten. I stood there numb, barely able to process what I was hearing. How does something like that happen? Transport buses don't just get ambushed like some action movie. How did they lose him? Where was the escort? Where were the backups? And why my school? Why that day? It didn't make sense. The police had already been at my house, waiting. They expected him there. Instead, the lockdown was called at Cedar Ridge Academy. Had the school become his new target? Was Emma the reason? Did we just barely avoid something unspeakable? I keep turning it over in my mind even now. Years later, I have no answers, just a spinning loop of questions that never quite land. The pieces never fit together the way they're supposed to. Maybe they never will. After everything, the sirens, the lockdown, the police, the chaos, they told me he was gone, disappeared, vanished into the shadows of whatever twisted road had led him here in the first place. They never found him. No arrests, no sightings, just gone. I stood in my kitchen that night, staring out the window like maybe I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the trees. I don't know what would have happened if Emma hadn't been with me in my classroom. I can't stop thinking about that. Would he have gotten to her? Would he have tried? Was it really him at the fence that morning, or have I just convinced myself it was? I've told this story more times than I can count, to police, to family, to friends, to therapists, even to myself in the dark when I can't sleep. Every time I lay it all out like puzzle pieces on the table, hoping this time they'll connect, that the full picture will finally make sense. It never does. It still feels random, chaotic, senseless, like someone dumped the pieces from the wrong puzzle in front of me and dared me to solve it. I go through the same motions. What if I had walked out to the fence? What if I hadn't called for Emma? What if we'd been a minute slower during the lockdown? I don't know if we were lucky or if this was just a delay, a horrible intermission before something worse. I wish I had an answer, something solid to cling to, but I don't. I live with the questions. The school went back to normal eventually. The kids forgot, but I never did. I never will.